Force Awakens.
There were three possible outcomes. Either this movie was going to be excellent, or it was going to be really bad, and then we'd at least have fun talking about it, or it was going to be merely correct, merely okay. And I'm afraid that The Force Awakens is merely okay, merely correct, and it has a lot of flaws, alright? And I'm going to talk about the flaws that I haven't seen many people talking about. Of course, many people mentioned the similarities between between The Force Awakens and the original movies, and even the prequels sometimes. So again, we have a droid containing important information, a new Death Star, a bad guy appearing in a hologram. But I'm going to start with the stuff that I haven't seen a lot of people talking about. And the first one is the awful dialogue. The dialogue in this movie is really bad. And we were expecting something better because we have Kazanbak, the man who wrote the screenplay to Empire Strikes Back. And I had noticed this from the trailers that I hadn't heard any memorable line of dialogue, only very generic, cliched stuff like, I have nothing to fight for, or who are you? I'm no one, or nothing will stand in our way, nothing will stop us. So, and when I watched the movie for the first time, I confirmed this impression, and I think that the dialogue in this movie is not so great. For instance, there is a lot of heavy exposition in the conversations. So, for instance, the first scene where Snoke has a conversation with Kylo Ren, and he says, "Your father is on that ship, Han Solo." Okay, so don't they both know who Han Solo is? Wouldn't it be better if he had simply said, "Your father is on that ship," or "Han Solo is on that ship," and perhaps even leave the revelation for the end of the movie, maybe. And then there's another scene where, again, Snoke is talking to Kylo Ren, and he says, "Even you, Master of the Knights of Ren, have never faced such a task." More exposition. And then we have a stupid scene where C-3PO basically explains to the audience that he looks different, right? So he might as well have turned to the camera and faced the audience directly and said, "Hey, I'm self-aware, I look different." And then there's another line between General Hux and Commander Snoke again, and General Hux says, "We have to destroy the government that is supportive of the rebellion, the resistance, the New Republic," explaining that the New Republic supports the resistance. But don't they know that? That sounds very stupid. And dialogue between Han and Leia is really bad, and it's heavy with exposition. For instance, Leia says stuff like, "It was not your fault that our son turned bad. It was Snoke. He did it. He seduced our son." Again, more exposition. I think George Lucas handled exposition better in the movies that he wrote. For instance, in The New Hope, the scene that is most heavy with exposition is when Obi-Wan talks to Luke about the Force, and he explains to Luke what the Force is. Now, Luke is not familiar with the Force and that kind of stuff, so it makes a lot of sense. It's a lot more, exposition is a lot more natural in that scene. And even in Episode 1, you have Anakin ask Qui-Gon about the midichlorians, and he explains what midichlorians are, an important concept for the subsequent films. And it makes more sense because Anakin, he doesn't know much about it, he's new to this world as well. Though it feels a little bit forced in The Phantom Menace because Anakin needs to bring this up. So, but still, it was more natural than the exposition that you get in The Force Awakens. Of course, the prequels have their shortcomings as regards dialogue. So you have this stupid line of dialogue where the Emperor says, "You must choose. I have the power to save the one you love. You must choose." Because Lucas, he can't get the actors express what they're feeling or thinking. He needs to get the characters say what they're thinking or feeling. So that was the main flaw in the prequels. And then you have a couple of Walt Disney moments For instance, when Rey, she sees herself as a kid, and then she has the same hairstyle, and she's wearing the same clothes. That's so stupid. And then there's another Disney moment where Rey refuses to sell BB-8 because movie. Now, another glaring flaw in the movie was the dull, boring, generic, and forgettable John Williams soundtrack for this movie. I can't think of a single theme, a single memorable theme. It was all very generic, and in the previous Star Wars movies, they each had at least a couple of memorable themes, right? Did you leave the theater after Force Awakens? Did you leave the theater with the music in your head? No, you didn't, because there was no memorable theme. The only theme that stood out a little bit was the last one, where in the last scene where Rey meets Luke, and that was okay, I guess, but it sounded a little bit like Harry Potter, a little bit like Hogwarts, right? And with the exception that the first two Harry Potter movies had better soundtrack than The Force Awakens. So that was a huge disappointment. I was expecting new. There was no Kylo Ren theme. There was no First Order theme or Resistance. Nothing that I could discern. Nothing that stood out for me. Now to the similarities between the movies. Now you have to make a distinction, I think, between rip-off, theme repetition, and fan service. And The Force Awakens has all the three. So, what is a rip-off in The Force Awakens? Of course, it's the new Death Star, right? And the new Death Star planning to destroy the Rebel base, and they're having limited time to destroy the station all over again. Another rip-off was the search for Luke. Again, we've seen that before. It's not even the search for a different person, it's for the same character, right? And the enemy seeing to it personally, like Darth Vader did in Empire. An example of theme repetition is the character of Rey, for instance. So she's poor, she is abandoned in an arid planet, and she's force sensitive, and she's a good pilot. That's a theme repetition, and that's alright, I'm fine with that. And an example of fan service is, for example, when Leia says something about Han destroying the Death Star, or when Finn activates the chess game in the Falcon. That's an example of fan service. Now, to the characters. I think they are promising characters. Of course, the performances are great. But just because Daisy Ridley's Rey, right, just because her acting is good, doesn't mean that Rey is a great character. I think Rey is ultimately boring and interesting. Compare Rey to Luke and to Anakin Skywalker, and I think they make for much better characters. Of course, Anakin has bad Lucas dialogue in the prequels and bad acting. But the character itself is way more interesting than Rey. Rey has no struggles. She succeeds every time. And then she wants to go back to Jakku. Finn, he's okay, I guess. The idea of Finn is great. I think that was one of the few original things in the movie. But I think Finn was assigned one of the worst lines in the movie. For example, take the moment where he says, "Droid, please." And take the moment where Finn is talking to Rey and he says, "Oh, you got a boyfriend? Cute boyfriend?" That's so unbefitting of a Star Wars movie. Star Wars characters, they don't have that kind of conversation ever. And Poe Dameron, he was okay. That's it. I mean, the characters are very thin. I think Biggs, in his tiny appearance in the special editions, was a way better character. We had way more depth than Poe Dameron. And it was way more tragic when he died. I think that Kylo Ren was by far the best character in the picture. Kylo Ren's dilemma of being tempted by the light side is a great spiritual theme that I think Star Wars deserves. And his tantrums, I think, were appropriate. They were in character. And I love the first scene. I love his appearance. And I love that he kind of force freezes a shot in mid-air. So that was an interesting thing we had never seen before. I want more of this stuff. And I think that the CG characters were really bad. They were really disappointing. They looked awful. Then you have again, but why does the snow have to be a digital character, right? For example, see the stuff that George Lucas has done with the people from in Episode 3. The people from Utapau, they were like tall and they kind of looked like Snoke. Like I think they could have done similar work with makeup, and the result would have been much better. Why did they need a CG character? Well, because it's Andy Serkis's name in the final credits of the movie, and then you have Lupita Nyong'o's character who could have been a puppet. I think it would have been very appropriate if Lupita's Mascanada was a puppet. But then again, no, we need to have an Oscar-winning actress in this movie. And I think that there's still time to salvage the situation. But let's be honest about this movie, in that it's very flawed and it's a disappointment.